Thank you. Welcome to today's Council Ordinary Meeting of today's date, 14th of December, and I welcome those online. Thank you, councillors. Can we please stand for the reading of the council prayer? Councillor Dalgetty.
Almighty God, as members of the Rangitikei District Council, we give thanks for all the good things of our district and the advantages we enjoy. We pray that you will give us wisdom and guidance as we conduct the affairs of this meeting. We pray for all the communities and the district we represent. Help us to be fair and honest in our discussions, and help us to work together in unity for the welfare of all your people. Amen.
Thank you, Councillor. I have an apology from Councillor Piki Te Ora Hira. Everybody else is present. Could somebody so move? Thank you, Councillor Wilson, Councillor Duncan, seconding. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you. Move to item 3, the public forum. We have no public forum as of today's date. Moving then on to the conflict of interest declarations. Do I have any conflict of interest that you wish to declare at this stage, bearing in mind you can declare later when you come to an item? No, thank you very much. The confirmation of the order of business. We have a couple of late items that have been added to both, I believe, into your Chief Executive's report. And in addition, some extra additions to my mayoral report. Other than that, I see no change of order of business. Is that correct to start? Thank you. Moving on. Looking at confirmation of minutes, starting on looking for alterations and corrections, starting on page 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It's not a correction, but it was missed as an action for this meeting. So with regards to Lake Waipu, page 12, 10.2, His Worship the Mayor requested this project be part of a presentation to the new government prior to the Ratana celebrations in 2014. With 2024, sorry. And when I look at the actions accrued, it's not listed in action, but I think I had a discussion with staff, it will be picked up. So I'm not seeking a correction, but just an outcome with that. Pages 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. Any alterations? Councillor Wilson.
Just happy to move, noting your comments.
Thank you. Looking for a seconder to that. Thank you, Councillor Carter, seconding. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Takes us through to the follow-up actions from previous meetings, and I'll take them. Can we ask for questions from the first page running through 1 to 17? Give you a minute to refresh your memory. A number have been completed. No. And the second page, which is 18 through to 25 of actions.
I just personally had a query through you, Mr. Chairman, on the Otara Bridge as to whether we still want that there as a
item number,
or whether you're happy with updates or non-updates at the moment.
Sorry,
Item 18.
Item 18. The Otara Bridge.
I'm happy for it to stay there if that's the wish, but there's nothing happening at the moment.
Councillor Dalgetty.
I would prefer it stayed there. I believe they're going to start on site on the 29th of January. So, yeah, I just think there's going to be some work imminently. So let's leave it there. It's not completed until April next year, but I'd like to see it stay there.
The only thing I'd like just an answer to, we were concerned about the closures of the road while bridge repair work was going on. Was there anything on the websites around the closure of the road or restricted access doing up the railway line intersection on that same road? Were you councillors aware that had happened? Okay, that's interesting. Thank you. I might just check as to how they handled that process, but I'll do it offline. Councillor.
Could I ask through the chair how Councillor Dalgety knew about this, because there's been no information on the council website or the Manawatu website since 2 months ago.
Good question. Councillor Dalgety, can you respond?
I went onto the Rangitaki District Council website
Oh,
and got that information when I read my earlier this week. So
Right. I'll let Councillor Dalgety skill you on the reading of that particular website.
Thank you.
Councillor Morn. No? Moving on, would somebody like to move that the meetings be received?
Sorry, can I just go back to that in that case?
Yeah, test your luck. Yeah.
I wonder if that information then shouldn't be in here as an update. That in fact the work is expected to be starting on the 29th of January.
I think Councillor Dalgety is saying it is on there, but you saying it's
No,
not.
I'm sorry, in this report, would it be worthwhile noting that that's the progress?
The difficulty, I'll ask for staff comment in a second, but the difficulty will be that if people start to rely on our council process here, when things change on a daily or fortnightly basis, that they may look for this information in the wrong area. Is that a fair comment? I'll take that as a yes.
Yes.
Councillor Rakawa.
Number 19, it just says in progress, but do we know who the iwi is getting consulted? How long is the consultation going to last to get this macron over the rangisike?
I can answer that. Councillor, we actually had this coming to the Turupuahika meeting that's been cancelled the last 2 times, so it's well in progress. Iwi have been consulted on it and it needs to go back to Turupuahika, so we need to wait for that meeting.
Thank you.
Anything else? Councillor Wilson, did you have your hand up to say you're receiving?
Oh, yes, happy to receive.
Did we have a seconder?
Yeah,
Seconding. Councillor Lambert, those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Takes us through to item number 8, the Mayor's report, and I'll certainly take it as read and look for any questions. It's been a busy space, so I'm just going to update you on 2 or 3 other things. Thank you. First of all, with the resignation of Councillor Kalkin, I would move as part of my report that we send a letter of thanks to Councillor Kalkin for his service on this council. Looking seconded to that for a separate recommendation to this report. Any further comment on that? Oh, because I'll pass it as a separate recommendation in its own right. I'll just speak to it very briefly. Now, people's circumstances change, and there's no criticism here of Councillor Kalkin, nor has there been a criticism of from Councillor Kalkin back to this organisation, either operationally or governance, the governance level. So there may be, we'll have conversations, I'm sure, with them in the future, but it's the right and proper thing to do to be able to thank somebody. Any other speakers?
seconder, as a seconder. I'd like to reiterate those comments and thank Councillor Kalkin publicly for his contribution to around the council table. It's been very informative and valuable in our decision making over the last 12 months. So thank you, Jared.
So that part's dealt with. There are a number of changes by government, and literally at the moment it is happening day by day. So if I look in just the last few days, we've repealed the RMA reforms, we've repealed 3 waters. We have just had a letter that comes out of this report later around traffic speed by consultation, etc. That's all been put on hold, and when we come to that item, I'll be looking just to receive it, and I've got a motion to be able to deal with that. Even as of yesterday, the government have made probably a very brave decision. I'm not going to argue the merits of it around the ferry replacement between North and South Island. But so there's a whole lot of things that we are still waiting on direction and instruction from government. And it is frustrating for council, frustrating for communities, and it affects how we position ourselves in our long-term plan. I'll take any questions around my report or any of my engagements. Any questions, Councillor Wilson?
In the absence of questions, I'm happy to move both recommendations that your report be received and that council send a letter of thanks to Councillor Calvin.
Done the letter of thanks.
You haven't moved it, I don't believe, as yet. So only sent there as a recommendation.
Okay, thank you. You looking for a second and then it's up for discussion? I'm prepared to second, but Councillor, you've got a question.
No, I just wanted to say that it's rather extraordinary the way you get around the Christmas parades, for instance. There's just one thing that you do during the year, but I think it's really important for communities, and they see that as a real mark of engagement, that they respect, and it means a lot to them. So I think possibly Santa's not the only one with a sleigh. Well done. Thank you.
Yeah, it is. I'll just say it is a very tight schedule, believe me, and unfortunately each community knows that there is that schedule and knows that I just can't stay. Councillor Rakawa.
Kia ora. It's been in your report, but I'd just like to acknowledge and mihi to our new chief exec, his first meeting for our council meeting. So ngā mihi nui ki a koe, Kevin. Thank you very much for coming on board, helping alongside us. Want to wakatau you, nau mai, hora mai, kia ora, ngā mihi.
Thank you, and you're right, and I think I had previously acknowledged the appointment, and there will be a little bit of a more formal process around receiving Kevin as the chief executive. So, but your comments are appropriate. Any further questions around my report? We've got a mover and second, and I'm looking to move on. Right, Councillor.
Oh, move. Moved.
We've got Councillor Wilson has beaten you to the punch there, but you'll take your seconding. Put it to the date. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Thank you very much. We now move on to the Chief Executive's report. I'll pass it over to the Chief Executive. Where he passes it next is up to him. Sir.
I'll pass it to Carol.
Thank
Like a
you.
hot potato.
It is hot potato. You will note that this report is quite brief because we only had a meeting a couple of weeks ago. So I'll just go through each section if there's any questions on the events held across the district.
Councillor Duncan.
Just wanted to note that 2.2, 11th of November, Armistice Day, we also held an event in Taihape at our cenotaph. If that could be included, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I put an apology that I couldn't attend that because it falls obviously on the 11th day, 11th hour, etc. So, but it is important we recognise these things. So, yep.
Thank you. I just probably make a point. Some of these that don't actually have formal bookings is why they're left off this list. So that's useful to know. Are there any questions on the health and safety and wellbeing update? The dashboard's attached. No. Just noting a couple of staff members who have joined the organisation and a couple who have farewelled.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then a comment there around the funding from the Dunning Trust, which is really good news. I think, Your Worship, you mentioned that at your last meeting.
So yes, the last meeting I gave the total figure of about $930,000, which is a record for the Dunning Trust, and it's very significant funding. I also gave some of the highlights of that funding, but this comment is directed at the $35,000 to libraries. So libraries are named within the trust deed. That's quite specifically as part of what should happen on a yearly basis, and I think only 1 year was scoped. Any questions around that item?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Just on the item 6.1, just noting that the application there was declined, but noting that there were so many applications for this fund this year. So we are working on whether there's an alternative to get some funding for that event.
Carry on.
Just moving on to external submissions, yes, like Your Worship said, everything is a moving feast at the moment. It's getting very difficult to keep up with all the changes, and where we are proposing to do submissions, we say that 1 week and then the next day we get told there's no longer going to be submissions on that. So this will be a bit messy for a while in terms of freshwater, which is now being repealed as well. Just noting that we do have one additional item which was omitted from the report, but His Worship felt it was worth putting to today's meeting, and that's in relation to a funding request from the Bulls and District Community Trust. Heidi Macaulay wrote in to the Mayor to request $10,000 towards the festival event being held in February next year. And the reason that they've now requested funding it through a direct request is that they felt they had made an application to the Dunning Trust and didn't get as much funding from that as they thought they were going to. So they now have a shortfall, and they were asking Council whether they would contribute to that.
I'll take that a little bit further. So when I received that, I passed it on to the Chief Executive, hence this is why it's sitting in the Chief Executive's report. However, I also wrote back to Heidi and said that I'm prepared to pass it on to the Chief Executive, potentially tabled at this meeting. But I said, ask for a clarification. Did they attempt to apply for any of through our normal funding council? The answer is no, they didn't. And I said that makes it difficult for council because we don't have a fund that would be associated with that. I said council may, and I stressed, I said may possibly consider Te Matapihi at giving them, because that was part of their budget, the use of Te Matapihi, but we'll see where it lies. So the recommendations you have with that are got to come up in line.
So one of the considerations for council is whether you provide discretion to the Chief Executive to make a call on funding or a reduction in the hire for Te Matapihi.
So first of all, would somebody move the Chief Executive's report be received first of all? Councillor Morn, you're happy to do that? Reception, Councillor Dalketty. Yeah, he said Duncan, I was looking at you. Those in favour?
No.
Those against? Carried. Recommendation 2, and it could be split up however you wish. Councillor Wilson.
Having just seen that recommendation now for the first time, I think it is appropriate that the Chief Executive takes that on board himself to speak with the group in Bulls. So I would be happy to move that recommendation.
So that it's up, this is so that it's up for discussion, and there will be discussion, I'm sure. So you're happy to move
As worded.
the discretion back to the chief executive? Second, councillor Carter, appropriate Southern Ward. I'll take questions around this before we start to get into a discussion. Any questions around this? Councillor Duncan?
So this is an established festival.
It has been run for the last 2 years.
And we have got a new fund that's come out to support established festivals, is that not right? They haven't applied for
They
it.
haven't applied for that yet.
Is it still open?
The dates no longer, you can't refer it back to something in the future because the date will have been and gone.
So we
Right,
close
so
it.
it doesn't close in time.
The question I'd have from sorry.
So if I can just
Yeah,
clarify
sure.
that, through this, there's a one-off, which I think councillor Duncan's referring to, through Creative New Zealand. We can, because it is an external committee, we could call a meeting earlier, we just still need to do a bit of work checking the dates, etc. The fund available is just under 8,000, so it still wouldn't cover the full request, but potentially could be considered under that.
The question from that, even if you thought that the funding was available, it is a contestable fund.
Yes, correct.
And if you go and spend all that money, that go and closes people off. So therefore I'll go back to my question, the chief executive. Where would you expect this to be funded out of? If you were going to.
That's the question. It's a bit of a, through you, Mr. Chairman, it's a bit of a hard one coming late because obviously the contestable ones are no longer there. So there is some discretion on fees and charges that could be made. But I think Councillor Duncan pointed out that it is an event that is pretty well recognised in their area. So we sort of feel that, not an obligation, but a desire to be helpful. It's just a matter of finding a place that that some of that money can come from. So whether it's given through refunds or discounts on some of the fees and charges, but remember that still impacts on the council in some way. But it is what it is, and I think they've been probably tripped up.
So Councillor Wilson, sorry, a question?
Yes, please. Can someone please just give me more information about what the festival actually looks like? What is it? What is it, and how many people are involved? As in, how many people attend?
So previously it was known as the Rhythm and Bulls,
Oh, okay.
and then this year, or this coming year, they've changed the name. And yeah, so it includes performances from local musicians. There will also be entertainment for the young with circus, trapeze acts, face painting, balloon making and more. At the hall they're going to have local groups and clubs, including stalls displaying what can be offered by our community. And they'll have the council play trailer, Sport Wanganui is supporting it, as are the Bulls, Air Scouts, Ohafia Cadets, and so much more, they say.
Did that not come in front of us before?
It's come to us in funding before.
Yeah.
And in those previous rounds, this event was held not at Te Matapi, it was held down by the park.
Okay.
Question?
Just a question. We had discussions along similar lines in the last meeting 2 weeks ago, and one of the issues or concerns was that these items were unbudgeted for and they turned down. Can I ask how different this application is to the ones 2 weeks ago?
Well, I think this one's to do with an event. And remember the last one that I was saying was more a community grant for somebody that does good in the community. that perhaps the council hasn't got an ideal funding stream for the community good that are contributing to your well-being, and maybe we need to look at that, which is something that we're going to do. This one is an event that has been held previously, so it has been in like an agenda and a program of events. So in terms of unbudgeted for, it appears that they may have felt that their request was going to be fully funded by another organisation, so they're caught on hold.
Supplementary, not an opinion, but a question.
It's an opinion, so I leave it for
Sorry, the answer is no, because the speaker must speak first, the mover must speak first.
I'm seeking a little bit of clarity here. I may have misread the recommendation, and you made the comment that it could be broken up into two. I've misread the recommendation, particularly the section says one, any funding. I took that funding to be relating to the reduction of hall hire. Is that not what that funding relates to?
This gives the motion as you've moved gives power to the chief executive for discretion over both funding and hall hireage. Do you wish to withdraw from your recommendation?
On that basis, I do, and I apologise to the council, but I've misread that understanding of that.
So, going back a step, now looking for a mover to the recommendation or any other recommendation. So if you want to split it up, that's your call. I'm looking, councillor.
I'd like to amend that recommendation. I'd like to remove one, any funding, and just stick with a reduction in fee for hire.
Okay, you don't, it's not an amendment because it's a new motion. So you're wishing to move that the council provides discretion to consider whether to provide a reduction in the fee to hire the hall for this event. Looking for a seconder to that. Councillor Wilson, you prepared to second that one?
Second that, yeah, it's my mistake.
I think we've had a number of questions, so therefore, Councillor Loudon, do you wish to speak to your motion?
I do. I think we need to have consistency around council decisions. I think this is a more simple way of going about it. Yeah.
Call for other speakers. We have one speaker in favour. Councillor Wilson.
Speaking in favour, and again, apologies team for misreading the earlier recommendation, but happy to support this one. I'm speaking in favour, but one of the things that's come out here is Councillor Dalgety has asked what this organisation does, and we've heard some feedback. Had the proper council process been followed with regards to some of our funding channels, all of that information would have been available to councillors to get a greater understanding, and we would have been therefore possibly been in a better position to support in some way through our other funding channels. And I think this is the only way going forward from here that we can offer some form of assistance to this group to do the work that I'm looking to do.
Of course, and this still requires the discretion element.
Yes.
I have two speakers in favour. Councillor Moore.
I have got a question. The fees from memory would be around $250 for hire or $500 or something like that.
The use of the whole facility.
It's just over 1,300.
Not a,
So it's not 10,000.
no.
So
Yeah, I'll speak in favour of the motion, which may surprise some of you. But the fact is that, you know, it is a community effort and it's a community building, and I'm quite happy that the C has discretion on that amount. But again, backing up what Councillor Loudon said is that some of these requests are unbudgeted, especially those, some communities, things that we can, grants that can be used at the time, yes.
okay.
But for the motion.
We had three speakers for. Are there any speakers against the motion?
I have a question.
Lambert.
Reduced to what?
But the motion says at the discretion of the chief executive.
Yeah, so there's no set thing.
Okay. But through you, Mr. Chairman, I've given an indication of what probably the cost is.
Okay.
So that was a question. Speakers against, Councillor.
I've got a question as well. Does the Bulls or the Southern Ward committee have a grants fund that they can access? has that been applied for?
They do have a fund, but they wouldn't have sufficient money within that fund to fund 8,000.
That may,
But we were talking hundreds, not thousands. I'll speak against, and not, and partially against in effect. And my warning here is how often do people then have a process that they could apply to and subsequently don't apply and then come and ask for funds? That's my concern. And we had exactly the situation with rural games. So rural games, it had been outlined to them beforehand. This is the process to applying for council funds. They chose to ignore it, come straight to council as a special case, and I have a difficulty with that. So effectively, I suppose I'm speaking against. Any other speakers against? Right of reply.
Just one reply regarding rural games. Council recommendation at that time, it fitted under the new event sponsorship scheme, and if you read funding applications, the final point suggested if it's outside your normal timing for the February-March cut-off funding round, that you apply directly to council, which they did do. So those comments I don't think were warranted. Thank you, that's all I want to say.
Can't use right reply against that comment. Wished I could, but no. Any? Right, now I must put it to the vote. Those in favour of the motion? Motion is carried. Thank you very much. That now sits with the Chief Executive. Is there anything else in the Chief Executive's report that I haven't got with? Moving on then. Sorry, Councillor Duncan.
Sorry, just in relation to that, but I wonder if I could ask staff as part of the feedback to that there is a possibility for that group to apply to the one-off events fund from Creative Community, and perhaps then that staff might like to facilitate an early meeting.
The staff will have to reply to them per se because it's come to council. But you happy to take that on board?
Yes.
Thank you. Good point. Right. That takes us through to the reports with decision. And the first is a notice of motion that I've put myself, and this is a note of motion be accepted that a council to revoke the recommendations 2 and 3 of the resolutions 23 RDC 359 and 23 RDC 360. So these were in relation to the Tie Happy Bill and essentially to allow for various options depending on what parties, where they want to go in terms of the build. I'm looking for a seconder, so this can be discussed first. You're wishing to second. Thank you. Where we ended up was the possibility that there could be various options considered for the Tie Happy Bill, and there was the option first of all on one that the floor should be retained was carried. The option on the removing of the facade and replacing it with an alternate lightweight facade and a deconstruction to achieve that was declined. And I brought it to a workshop, which is I public, and we tried to understand the ramifications of that and tried to make it so that it was available for different people to come with different options. In other words, both considerations could be considered. With your permission, the Chair, I'd ask for a comment from Dana if I'm misreading this at all.
Thank you. No, that is probably in line with what the discussions we'll have. There will be further comment in the report later as well on the same topic, but it opens up the opportunity to discuss the options again.
So the revocation was on the basis of not full understanding, in my view, and a number of councillors' view at the workshop as to the ramifications of the position. So we've got a mover in a second. Any speakers to this? All right, I don't need to write a reply, I'll then put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Councillor Morn, do you wish to register the vote against? Okay, carried. Thank you very much. Now, where do I have to go next? Thank you.
So, 10.2.
We'll go to item 10.2. This is the reconsideration of rates remissions for earthquake buildings. And are you taking us through this?
I can do. So at the request of the last council meeting, there was a request for the chief executive and obviously delegated through to put a paper back to council to see whether there wants to be some reconsideration of the amount of both of these rate remission grants that were made in the October meeting. So this paper just facilitates that, noting that there has been a lack of clarity around some of the wording in that policy. And as you're all aware, we are reviewing that policy and making that wording more understandable and clear in the future. So this really is opening it up for discussion for what council would like to do.
Would somebody like to move the report be received? Move Councillor Wilson, Councillor Rakawa seconding. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carried. It would be useful, councillors, if we actually are speaking to recommendations here. Councillor Wilson.
I have to move recommendation 2 that council does not agree to consider the rates remission for 8 Tui Street, Taibi of the original $5,000 stands.
So this is that council does not agree.
Correct.
To reconsider and that $5,000 stays. Looking for a seconder to that. Councillor Carter seconding. Do you wish to speak to that?
Yes, I do. I think whilst I acknowledge there's the different interpretations for the policy is ultimately at the discretion of council. And I believe that council has set a precedent in the past for remissions of this kind. I think it's generous, and I think that the original decision of $5,000 to both to 8 Tui Street was a sound decision based on our policy, albeit misreadings of it by some party to another party. I believe it's a council decision. I believe it should stand.
Okay, can I ask council's view as how many councillors are wanting to speak to this? So we've got a huge number. 3, 4. Hopefully we'll still stay with the 3, 4 and 3 against. So I'm not going to waive standing orders on this item. Other speakers to this motion? Councillor Duncan.
Thank you. I believe that this is a policy that was written by council and passed by councillors, was agreed to not that long ago, and that although there might be the opportunity, I agree there is an opportunity to read it in different ways depending on your perspective. I think both of the people who have privately found this policy to be an incentive to do up their buildings, and I don't believe there is a precedent. I think these are in fact the first 2 private heritage buildings that have been done.
Just when you make a statement like that, I've just got to seek clarification. You believe?
I do believe that.
Do we have an opinion around that as to fact from staff? All right, that's fine.
Thank you. And their understanding was that it did say, and it does say, a full remission of rates for up to 3 years. And I think that we need to honour that policy. And if it's, and we've acknowledged that it's not the best policy perhaps, and that the wording needs to be clarified, and that's what we're doing. But in the meantime, I think we need to follow through with what we've actually set out that they understood to be the statement of the policy. So I'm speaking against this.
Just a ruling from the chair here, I will not accept an amended figure because that it goes against the principle of the motion. So if the motion is to succeed, that's where it sits. Other speakers.
Clarification, sorry, what do you mean by that?
So for instance, if somebody said, I want that amendment of that figure, if it goes against the principles of the motion, as I see it, Councillor Wilson?
It'll be a negative motion against the original motion. So you can't vote $5,000 as it stands out there. The only thing that the option is can be, the motion can be won or lost.
Yes.
I just want you to understand there is a technical rule around this. Looking for other speakers. So we've had one speaker for, one speaker against. Councillor Wong.
I was speaking against it. It's not a large financial figures at stake. And I do agree largely with Councillor Wilson. I do not like to relitigate this, but we're not setting a precedent because we are revising the policy to clarify it. And just as a gesture to these people who have done this on what they believed, and it will be the end of that, I believe that we should not grant this motion and reconsider the remission.
Any other speakers? Councillor Lowland.
Can I put an amendment to the motion or not?
Depends what the amendment says, but I can't accept an amendment of principle in terms of whether we fund it or not.
You can clarify for me, but amend to original rates from remission of 5,000 stands. I would like to see the full amount paid as per the policy, and I'd like an amendment to reflect that.
No, can't accept that, sorry. So your view is then to vote against the motion, and then you could conceivably put a figure in.
I'd like to vote against the motion.
So we've had now 3 speakers against the motion. We can take no further speakers against the motion. Any other speakers for the motion? Go back, right of reply.
Thank you, Chair. I think what we need to really be talking about here is the actual decision that was made. Whether or not it was made to a heritage building or not a heritage building, it was a decision that was made on the basis of a policy that exists within the council. And that is the basic fact. $5,000 of ratepayer money is generous in anybody's words. You know, we have to consider that this is cost straight out of ratepayers, it's straight out of the council funds. It's going to get effectively accredited to these people via their rates remission, and that comes at a cost. And this is not about whether or not they're worthy buildings or not worthy buildings. This is simply about a decision that was made by council and whether or not that decision is sound and stands at $5,000 or whether it doesn't. Quite simply, all I'm saying is that I think this decision was made and that's exactly where we should stick to. So, would you do a vote in favour?
We have to put it, the motion now needs to be put. Can I have those in favour of the motion? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is somebody abstaining?
No, we've got to, well, remember you've got 2 away. Oh, we should
Got
have.
2 away.
We should have. Yeah, 5 and 5.
Yeah. Shivers I've used. So I have a casting vote. The casting vote is that the status quo stays, because that is the position of council. By the way, I would reiterate that a casting vote is a casting vote to determine. It doesn't necessarily have to be with the status quo. There is nothing in our policies that says that. However, the norm is that a casting vote should be that a status quo position stays. So the motion is carried. Thank you very much with regards to 8 Tui Street, Taihape. Recommendation 3, the council agrees to reconsider the rates remission granted to 71 Hautapu Street, Taihape and approves a rate remission of, or that council does not agree to reconsider the remission and the original remission of $5,000 stays. Somebody like to move? Councillor,
I'm going to step into that field
yes,
again.
as to which one you can go.
I'm going to move that council does not agree to consider the rates remission granted to 71 Hautapu Street, having the original remission of $5,000 stands.
Looking for a seconder to that. Same second to Councillor Carter, second that. Wish to speak to this?
Given the earlier recommendation, I don't believe there's further discussion required from me.
Other speakers, Councillor Louder.
I'd like to speak against the motion. I think this is a risk to council. I think it's a tarnish of reputation. I think we have a policy and we should stand by that policy. And I'm actually very disappointed that we haven't stood by that policy.
I'll speak to it. I agree. Council did have a policy. Consideration of here is whether we followed the policy or the specific wording, and there's been an interpretation made elsewhere. But in terms of Councillor Loudon's comments, it's not as if we didn't have a policy. Sorry. Any other speakers? Councillor Duncan.
I'm speaking against it, of course. I agree with Councillor Loudon. I think this is a risk to our reputation. I think that our policies should be our people should have enough confidence in our policies to, when it says to incentivise earthquake strengthening of our buildings, that they believed it and went for it, and I think they'll be very disappointed. So I'm looking forward to the fact that we are rewriting this policy, and I hope that we have a sharper eye on them going forward. And I'm speaking against it.
Councillor Dalgety.
I'm speaking in favour of it. I agree with my fellow councillors across the table. However, we've now set that precedent at 5,000, so I can't, in the previous recommendation, so I have to go by that.
Any further speakers? Councillor Okawa.
I'd like to speak against it, based on what the other councillors have said. Yeah, they did the work. They had an understanding in our policy that they would be given a remission of rates for it, so kia ora.
There is the opportunity for anybody else speaking for, I think, otherwise I'll go back to right reply. Councillor Wilson.
I think we just got to be a little bit careful here that we're not here to debate the policy. Okay, we're actually debating the decision that was made from the policy. And I certainly look forward to policy being reviewed, and I have no doubt that Councillor Loudon and Councillor Duncan will be scrutinising any future wording on that policy in some detail. We're not debating the policy, we're debating the decision that was made. And as I said before, different determinations or interpretations is not what we're here to debate. The decision was made, and that's what we should stand by. And I'm quite strongly about that. We've made a decision, and the decision we should stick with our original decision.
Must put it to vote. Those in favour, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Carried.
Can I have mine?
you must address that to the chair, not to staff.
Sorry, Chair, can I have my against vote recorded on both recommendations?
Certainly. Councillor Duncan, do you wish to do the same?
Yes, please.
Thank you. That takes us through to 10.3 Marton Civic Centre, a recap and update on options. Who's taking us through this? Adina, thank you. Take us through it, please.
Thank you. We basically have written a report for you just to recap the discussion, a little bit around the history, the options, the discussion with Heritage New Zealand, and also included some commentary around cost to date on this project and some urgent maintenance work where I would like to point out that some of it is more urgent than others, probably. Also, there's included in the report a detail of a option here on this site, on the 46 High Street site, for a new build construction that would house all staff that are currently in this construction here and the library. And our recommendation, based on all that has been reported in the past, is for this new build option on 46 High Street to go ahead. Mostly because of the reasons that it is within budget that was set in the long-term plan. It's lower complexity and lower risk than some of the other options, and some benefits are still achieved for the community. And we also got some advice around whether or not we have to consult should this decision be made. And that advice was that we don't have to consult because there was a lengthy consultation on location as well as cost and options. I've got as requested, some images of, and I want to really stress that these are, thank you. These are just an impression, so please be aware of that. The question that we had received was around giving an idea of an impression of what that layout would look like, in sort of 3D raised up. But we haven't discussed any colours and any streetscape and anything around it, so just want to make that clear. And happy to take any questions you might have.
Just before we take questions, would somebody like to move the receipt of the report? Councillor Moore, you moving? Councillor Dalgety, you seconding. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Carried. I'll take questions. The question that I have, are you able to assure us with part of this report that the total project cost of this falls within the 19 million?
From the cost estimates that we have got at this point, we've asked for a total project cost to be actually $15 million, which allows us a bit of a buffer, so I'm quite confident that we would be achieving this.
So that includes the staff movements, etc. We don't have to purchase this site, all of that. So all considerations that you're aware of could be possibly be accounted for. Thank you. Take further questions, Councillor.
Further to what you were saying about staff relocation costs, at the last time this came up was talking about the costs of all that, taking that into account, so that's all been done.
Well, we, as part of the design itself, we've asked for it to be within $15 million, and they had a QS involved that confirmed that that's what's possible. For relocation and for the civil defence requirements, we allowed another $2 million, which would take us to $17 million, which still leaves us a little bit of buffer zone not to exceed the $19 million. And there's always actions we can take in a design process where we could reduce costs where possible. So that approach would still be taken.
Councillor Moore, if you've been at the workshop, this was covered.
Oh, yes, that's right. I'm just clarifying.
Take any other questions, councillors?
Perhaps just a bit of a clarification of some of the ideas with regards to that question that was raised at the workshop.
I'll just say that it was a carry-on question, comments from what the mayor had said 2 minutes earlier, but anyway.
Yeah, I think what Kevin was aiming at is that we had some discussions in our team and Ishra came up with this idea of we could build the civil defence shed first on our vacant site next to our offices here, and it could act as a relocation facility for a number of months while this place, the new build, would then be in construction. Then people can move into that place and we can finish the rest of this. So there's a staged approach that will allow us to reduce some of the relocation to, you know, not have people all over the place, which is good.
Further questions? Councillor Dalgety.
It's just the questioning the not taking it out to the public in a long-term plan is a key choice. So you've had expert opinion around that, and so just can you elaborate on that? I'll listen to your answer.
Depending where you go, yeah. Well, if you step into an opinion, I'll stop you, but yeah.
Oh, yeah, I wouldn't do that. So we sought advice from the auditor who will be auditing our long-term plan and our consultation document. And I had a discussion with him about whether audit felt there was a requirement to go back out and consult on this, and we discussed that how much consultation has been undertaken in the last particularly 8 years, but even prior to that, about looking for a new site. And also that the 19 million that Adina has talked about was in the last long-term plan, it's already budgeted for, and that if building on this site, so just to clarify, that wouldn't trigger any cost change, and that building on this site doesn't change any level of service, and they're the main triggers and what you consider going out for consultation. If anything, it's enhanced level of service, but not to the extent that you're providing anything new. So their opinion to me was that it covered all the provisions which I outlined in section 12 of this report, so that in talking to audit, we agreed that it would be useful to have that justification actually within the report itself. And when we do the consultation document for the next long-term plan, that we actually tell the story of, if council makes the decision today, we tell the story of how you got to that decision and how much consultation we've gone into making those points about the budget and everything as well.
So that's the legal opinion, the audit opinion. Doesn't stop you if there was a successful motion to go out for, doesn't stop you putting that if you wish to, but that's the position. Any other questions? All right, I'm looking for a mover of a motion, either that motion or any other. Councillor Rakawa, do you have your hand up, or is it a question?
No, I was just going to move that recommendation, number 2.
You're moving recommendation 2 that we proceed with the new structure on this site of 90 million.
Yes.
Looking for a seconder to that. Councillor Loudon seconding. You move. Do you wish to speak to the motion?
Actually, yes, I'd like someone put on that front thing, that's ugly, but anyway, I do think that out of the options that we were given, this is the one that I like the best and suits our budget the best.
Thank you. Looking for other speakers. I'll speak to the motion. I'm in favour of this motion. Do I think the process has gone on for too long? Yes, I do. We've consulted to death, and it's adding effectively, by my reckoning, $3 to $5 million a year over the last few years process, and that's been confusing. Do I think everything's been perfect? No, I don't. But I think that we've reached a position where the best advice, and I thank staff for their time, I thank councillors for their questioning time, because they should do that. We're talking very large sums of money here. but I think absolutely this is the right direction for council this time. Looking for other speakers, Councillor Dalgetty. I'll waive the speaking rights here.
I too speak in favour of this motion. I feel we need to move on, and I feel the alternative at say 35 million plus was just too inexpensive option for the size of our ratepayer base. And I thank staff for coming up with an option here that we initially weren't considering to such a degree. And yeah, I look forward to progressing this through.
As I said, I've waived standing orders here. This is a very significant expenditure, and I'm prepared, as I have with Councillor Dalgetty, for people to give their view. You have spoken once already, Councillor Wong. I'm looking. Oh, sorry, Councillor Loudon. I had Councillor Wong first. Sorry, my apologies, Councillor Loudon. Councillor Wong.
I agree with most things that's been said before, but the public has not been probably as informed as perhaps Councillor Ronkawa in that our decision-making process. So I feel that before the decision is made, or as the decision is made, public consultation is I think it'd be quite important, because this is a big project, and it's been a very contentious issue between town and here and the money. So rather than make the decision and then explain why we've made it, I thought the earlier we get there, the better it would be going to the public.
Just to be very clear around process here,
Yes.
your process there will be to vote against the motion. And if the vote against the motion was successful and you wanted to put it back out for consultation, that's the motion you would need to pass. But you'd be reliant on it failing to be able to do that. And that's my opinion. Does the Chief Executive wish to advise me with regard to process?
I think your process is 100% right, but I was just wondering whether the publicity needs to go early, like now, rather than going to reconsult. I'm just not sure whether those two processes are what Councillor wants. Yeah.
So do you understand?
I leave to the wisdom of our elder.
For you, Mr. Chairman, you clearly are the decision makers here. All I can do is provide
Councillor Lambert, Councillor Loudon first, then Councillor Lambert, Councillor Loudon.
I speak for the motion. This has been, well, firstly, I'd like to thank Adina and Ishwan for the work done. I think it's a common sense approach. It fits in with a long-term plan budget, which every council is struggling with at the moment. This long-term plan budget was actually set 3 years ago. So to be sitting underneath that is a very positive outcome. The site is not subject to flooding, and I think it's such a common sense approach that this council needs to make to go forward. And it's nice to see it finally happening. I'm personally aware of a scheme very similar to this, 2008. It was put before council, and to have some finality is great.
Thank you. Councillor Lambert.
Yeah, I fully support this. I agree. Like option 2 was my favourite as well, and I'm pleased to see it's gone through. I pinched myself. It has happened. It's true, and we could not have provided a better present for staff than this. And yeah, that's the staff's Christmas present sorted.
Councillor Wilson.
It's an expensive staff Christmas present. Look, it's unfortunately the reality that we are facing is time's up, and that's where we're at. Time's up, and a decision has to be made. I'm I'm happy to support this decision. It saddens me that it does nothing to enhance our town centre when the original focus of this discussion, which started way back in 2013, was. And I think people have lost sight of the fact that it wasn't about building a glorified tower to council staff. It was nothing to do with that. It was about building a multi-purpose building that could facilitate a number of different options and to enhance our town centre. And over the time, failure to make a decision has increased in costs, and it now leaves us in a situation where, as I said before, time is now up and we don't have any other option apart from to endorse this recommendation. However, as I said, it does sadden me that it does nothing to support our town centre and does nothing to support the original vision of council when this first came to play, and that saddens me somewhat. However, as I said, time's up. I don't think we have any other option but to support.
Councillor Duncan.
Yes, I'm definitely in favour of this because it means that something can happen and these buildings are past their due by date. And I agree with Councillor Wilson about the heritage not having a council input at this stage, but there's been so much work done here, and this is a great plan, and I think the people of Marton will see it's as well as, and not necessarily instead of. So here's to that. Thank you.
Any other speakers? I go back to right of reply, but bearing in mind I've yet to hear somebody speak against. Councillor
No, I just want to say that this decision, everyone said it's a long time coming. It'd be great to see, because I know I sit here on behalf of a lot of people, ratepayers, who have mentioned and said, you know, what is happening, and they'll finally be able to see what is happening. There'll be a decision. They don't have to guess about any of the three buildings anymore, what's happening around town. They'll be able to be told. Kia ora.
right, I must put to the vote those in favour. Just raise your hands. Those against. Carried. Thank you very much, and I would like staff to take note of the mover has suggested that the front of it doesn't look attractive. So please, there needs to be some discussion there around the appearance and look of the premises.
I'm not sure, sorry, I didn't take account, but was it a unanimous vote? Is it worth noting that that was unanimous?
Just to do that, we'll just recheck. Those in favour. So, Councillor, you are voting in favour. Correct. That can be recorded as such.
Thank you.
I feel like opening the wine or champagne or something. I'm looking forward to it only being 15 million. Item 10.4, this is the Taiapi Town Hall and Library redevelopment, finalising scope. Carry on. Recommendation 1, that the report on the Taiapi Town Hall and Library redevelopment be received. Councillor Morton, you moving? Seconding. Councillor Lambert. Those in favour? Those against? And I do note the revocation earlier, 10.2, I think it was, or 10.1, whichever. Now, that the project work plan for the Taiapi Town Hall and Library redevelopment, including its detailed scope and project priority as attached in this paper, will be endorsed with or without amendment. I'll take questions in a minute, but just for very clear understanding. So as I understand the process, this allows for various options to come before an approach to council as to how strengthening is achieved and how compliance is achieved, etc. And there are some scope items in there around, for instance, the flooring and things. So there are some things that we have made decisions on. And then it will come back through a process of evaluation and come back to council for a decision on where you go with it. At stage 1, of the first process, which has a second stage to it. Have I got this reasonably correct? Or can you correct me?
Yes, could I correct, please? Can I make a comment on the report as well, so that I can get to my correction as part of it?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And then I'll take questions.
Thank you. So there's some part in front of the report that is just generally about projects, and I'll take that as read. And the procurement approach is also in detail listed in this report, and it also points out that the procurement approach that we're taking is so that we can comply with the resolution 23 RDC 175. The scope is as per pages 51 to 53 in your audit paper, and has a whole list of items obviously in it. What was important is from staff is that the scope needs to be defined and confirmed before we start the design process. Because of its importance of two of these items that we discussed last council meeting as well, and discussed again in a workshop that was public, we wanted just to point out again that there are two major items obviously that had a lot of discussion around it. But the way forward is, from my point of view, is that there's two ways. So whether you can decide now that there's options as per the scope item, and then professional opinion will be around flexibility in the design process, and it will be brought back sort of as an information for council, with a view on cost as defined in the priorities.
I'm going to stop you there. So it's not specifically on cost. So an evaluation that comes back from staff around any proposal, and council will make their decision based on cost and scope and whatever, but recognising that cost is a significant factor.
In the tender process, because of the nature of a design and build procurement, there's no cost item really that is being compared. As outlined, there are two stages that are mostly focusing on the capacity, their capability, if they have similar experience, and then the approach and methodology and their program, and around sort of maybe broader outcomes. But the price is not about the construction price, it's about their fees, basically, of what sort of fees they have. So when you get back a report around the tender engaging a organisation for the design and build, it will be a recommendation basically of the tenders that have been evaluated. This is the best team that we should be working with, and you may or may not agree with that, but at that point there's no design done so that we could actually cost it. To be able to compare these options correctly, you would have to go out and get a design made for basically 4 options or more, depending on the variation of having one in and one out. And to do that is obviously quite costly. So, and it would delay the process of starting as well.
Go to the chief executive before I go further with questions.
So just clarifying that though, when the group comes in, that consortium or the tenderers come in, at that stage they could still go either way with those two things that you've put in scope. So ultimately they could have the facade retained, or they could take it out.
Correct. And if I can add that there's one other way that council can decide as well, which would be to make a decision right here, right now about these 2 items. You know, like it could be either way. So you keep it either open for as it is written right now, you keep it open as an option for the design professionals.
Made that decision. Council have made that decision, in my view. Councillor Moore.
Question about process a bit. In this report in our notes here on the decisions, the revocation decisions, it's now in the scope in this report. In the workshop notes, our council decisions were put there as they're out of scope. So it appears that this paper has been written preempting a positive decision on our
No.
previous discussion?
I think that your interpretation is incorrect. So there was a decision on scope, and there was no, by revocating that decision, there is no scope with regard to that. In other words, company A could come along and say,
Oh, no, sorry, can I? No, my point is, okay, I wasn't at the workshop, but I did read the notes from the workshop. In the paper that was there, it had quite clearly the mezzanine floor out of scope, the facade out of
in scope.
in scope.
Correct, and that's been revocated.
Okay, this has been revocated, but these papers came to us yesterday. And in this paper, these things are back in scope. So what I'm saying is this paper prepared preempting a council decision of revocation.
So,
I know it's a technicality, but
the opinion is around that.
So the project work plan was, basically is now brought back to you again, and I have rewritten some of the components of the work plan based on discussions, but it hasn't been, this is just basically prepared for you to endorse it with or without amendment. So you can change it, and I think the revocation is now opening this up to be changed. Otherwise, it would just go back to what it was. But this is just written in preparation of changes that were discussed possibly, and you can change them.
Chief Executive. So to be very clear, if a company comes along and says, I want to retain the first floor, the second floor, they have that option within this paper. If they want to remove it as part of their solution, they also have that option. That both are within scope, correct? The same applies to the facade. So then you get companies who come with their various options, but I would expect that some price indication comes in as part of the early contractor involvement.
So, through you,
Well, sorry, before you go on, in terms of this paper, the first stage tender includes a response on how realistic the client's budget ceiling is and initial thoughts on achieving this. That opens the door, surely, for some sort of price indication.
Sorry,
So if you go to paper, page 56, early contractor involvement, which is the process we're seeing, that there seems to me to be two-stage process here. And the first stage tenderer gives a response which would include thoughts on the budget.
can I just say that as you develop that process though, although it might be a thought on a cost, the moment you get into the ground conditions and things like that, obviously that's going to have an impact on the long term. So I don't think any person that's successful at that stage will stick to a price or a given price, because they may give an indication, of what they're thinking, but you have to premise that by saying there's a whole lot, once they start taking the building apart, check the foundations, that can alter. So I'm not certain how definite that indication would be.
No, but I would be seeking an indication that the second stage tender and the paper that we have accounts for that. So if you go to the second stage tender, will involve the contractor working with the design team, etc., around before the contract is awarded. The first stage is working out who effectively you would like to work with. It would be useful to have an indication when it's written out, to have it an idea of A, how they're going to do it, B, their qualifications for your assessment, and an indication of what the building will look like and an approximate budget. I'll take just questions at this stage. Councillor Loughton.
Just a question, Adina, thank you. The scope seems to be fairly well vetted. Initially, you approached this with your triangle of scope, timing and cost. What's your prime point of the triangle? Is it scope, timing or cost? Because I do have a comment.
Thank you. In this updated work plan, it is cost, because what I believe I understand from councillors' opinions is probably around that cost saving is important, and if there are ways to reduce cost, then that's a positive thing.
I think in answer to that, when it comes back in the papers through council consideration, in deciding as councillors as to who you want to work with, then cost becomes a feature of that. And predominantly, and if you decide, as you have, that cost is a prime feature, that's when you take that decision.
A comment?
Probably we're just trying to deal with questions here. I just have a question, something that I've thought about subsequent to the workshop, and that is one about compliance. So in terms of fire, what do you think would be needed to gain compliance?
I cannot comment on that without having done any of the design.
The reason I'm asking this is because I wonder if we are assuming that there is a need for a firefighting capacity, in other words, sprinklers in the building, and I am not sure that that would be a compliance issue.
So we had initial discussions with a fire engineer, and from that discussion, it didn't sound like it was a requirement to have sprinklers in the building.
So, and I think that's probably likely, as a lay person that have done this sort of thing. But I just wonder if council has a view that having a firefighting capacity should be in scope. In other words, if you're going to invest a significant amount of money in this building, as councillors, would you want to have some fire sprinklers, or you just want compliance? So that's a question from me around scope, because I think a number of us may have assumed.
Your Worship, if I may make comment, I think that comes out of the second stage of what we're here to discuss. I mean, that may be something that our team come back to us with the focus on. Say, you could do this or you could do this, but this is where I think those are secondary things. I think we need to look at what we're talking about with the scope that's on the agenda in front of us.
I take that on board, but there are some things where we said it's been in scope, and some things we've said I'm just flagging it at this stage. Councillor Loughton.
I didn't have a question, I just had a comment about your comment. Yes, Tamaki Pihi has sprinkler systems, and to me it's a very similar sort of public space. I would raise the point that we are dealing with a rural fire service and limited abilities to cope with any issue in that environment.
All I'm doing is raising an item that could be significant in terms of scope.
Perhaps just for clarity from me, is that I would imagine that if you are still putting cost as a driver, then compliance from that fire regulation would not include a firefighting capacity. That's my feeling. So if you were of the view and were happy with increasing costs, then you could stipulate that sprinkler system needed to be included.
That's what I'm getting at. That's exactly what I'm getting at. However, I also take on board the Deputy Mayor's view that that could be dealt with subsequently in terms of discussion, but it could be a significant item.
Let's go.
Okay. Adina, do you think it's important enough that we should decide whether it's in scope?
I would say that if it is important to you to require us to have it in scope, even if it may be against the common advice of the fire engineers, we can consider it, of course. But it will increase cost, unknown.
It certainly would. Councillor Wilson.
Sorry, Your Worship, just to go on about this, on top of page 52, in the scope layout, building code of compliance, especially accessibility and fire safety. You know, it's in scope to have a look at that. I don't think we should be starting to pick into that as a specific at the stage, because if we start going down this list here, we'll be talking about lots of specifics. It's quite simply, it says in scope, especially accessibility and fire safety. I would say just it's in there, and if there's a fire report that says one with and one without, I don't see that we need to be shooting the fat over this one too much.
This is just going ahead of compliance.
Just on that same page, once again, the strength in the building to a minimum of 80%. I think that was clarified by Mrs. Gordon the other day, that it should read minimum of 67 to 80% depending on cost. Is that not what we agreed on?
It is corrected in one line but not in the other, so
So yes, it was agreed. All right, so any further questions before I go to a motion?
I'm looking to move. Recommendation to.
I'll let you move.
I'd like to move it endorsed without amendment.
Looking to us for a seconder. Councillor Loudon seconding, so the process is endorsed without amendment. Do you wish to speak to this?
What was that, sorry?
You wish to speak to it?
Yes, I do, because I think what's really, really important here is this is not the first time we have seen this report, and it's what's led on from the earlier recommendation to revoke some decisions made by council. We were very, very fortunate to have had a workshop on this, and I note that it was a public workshop where we discussed in some detail what's actually involved with regards to the scope and the information that's been put in front of us. And largely, councillors at the time didn't understand, but we came away from that workshop significantly more knowledgeable on the subject. If we have a look through the scope that's been sitting here in front of us, there are a number of wording changes which I believe reflect the councillors' thoughts from that workshop and have now been incorporated in that scope. So I think by endorsing it without amendment, it gives us the ability to move forward. Let's start to then get out to some sort of design and costings, and some of these other discussions will come back to us as councillors for some further more detailed discussion. But we've still got to get to stage one. We haven't got there yet. This is only stage one. Let's get moving off it.
Further speakers, councillor. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to speak in support of it too, and thank staff for the flexibility that they've shown in assisting us in understanding it better and opening the scope a bit further. So thank you.
Speaking forward, thanks Adina and Ishman again, and staff. I'm pleased that there have been a refocus with cost. I think that's actually, as governors were in the long-term plan, we've set a basic budget. When I think about cost, I don't think about the cheapest. I really wish for full compliance and safety for our residents. But stage one is really important, and I agree with Dave. Let's get going.
Councillor Dalgety.
I will be speaking in favour of this motion.
Just hang on. Councillors, are you happy if I waive the standing orders with regard to this item on the same basis of considerable cost?
Yeah, I think the people of Taiapi will be thrilled that we are working towards getting their hall open again and in full use in the community.
I'll speak to this. I'm in favour of this, but I am in favour of having an indication of what the building will look like and what the approximate cost range would be as part of that evaluation, because without that, council's not in the position to be able to decide who we will engage with further. Any other speakers? Right. Right to reply, Councillor Wilson.
Not required, Your Worship.
Put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. The records show that that is also unanimous. Boy, I've never seen so much money spent in that company ever. It must be Christmas. Moving to item 10.5, the draft speed management plan consultation requirements. Councillors, there has been subsequent changes to this, and I have got somewhere, I'll find it. Thank you. A recommendation here from me. So I'm reading that council note that due to the change in government's position in relation to the land transport rule, setting of speed limits to 2022, the speed management plan will not be adopted for consultation at this time. I'm wishing to move. This is because of the government's revocation. Looking for a second, Councillor Dalgety. Is that what you're wanting to do? I'll speak to this very briefly. Essentially, there's no point in us going down a process when we're told there's going to be imminent changes in government's position here. We've got enough things to deal with in terms of our workload and time. Any comment from staff?
Just to say that if you wanted to, once the government position is clear, to reduce some speeds adjacent to schools or whatever, then we could do that as a separate document sometime in the new year when we're not so much under pressure. But that would be the council's behest as opposed to government direction, which is what this is.
Yeah. Any other speakers that will put it to vote? Put it to vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Oh, that takes us a long way deep into the council agenda. So do we move to items 11.1? This is the receiving of the minutes. Could we receive, somebody move that we receive them as a block?
Happy to move as a block.
Looking for a seconder to that. Councillor Lambert. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Thank you very much. Recommendations. There's the Santok Domain Management Committee recommendation. There were some recommendations in there, weren't there? Can I just have clarification from staff?
I only reviewed the minutes recently, so the recommendation.
So we'll deal with recommendations at a subsequent meeting? I'm fine with that. The timing is so close to when these meetings were held. In fact, the Santok Domain is tonight.
Yeah, so this is
So we-
the previous,
Yeah, the previous one.
but we only received the minutes lately.
So then the next thing that I'd need to do was for somebody to move that we go into public excluded for the reasons given. Councillor Wilson.
Happy to move for the reasons given and as also for the reasons circulated in today's agenda.
Seconded. Thank you. Before we so move, unfortunately, it will be in public excluded. I'd like to thank the two of you, one's hidden away behind me, Ken. So I'd like to thank the two of you for appearing today. It is fantastic. You are members of the community that actually take an involvement, and I congratulate you for that. Put the motion for public excluded to a vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you very much. And what I might do, can we stop for an early break?